So, hi everyone, welcome to another meeting and another podcast episode. If you're listening to the podcast or you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about our gatherings, the online community, paid private mentoring with myself on the website. It's www.acimwithkeith.com. All right, let's get on with our meeting. Again, we did have a vote in the Facebook group as regards what people wanted to um, have covered in the podcast. And last week was the number one vote, which was the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Everyone is very sorry they asked. Now, this week, we're going to cover the second most popular option, which was the Dark Night of the Soul. Let's get into that. We're going to be working off the development of trust from the manual for teachers, because that's where this is covered. And let's get going. Now, let's take the first quote. Let's talk about the first stage the course talks about. It would be a mistake to think that these stages necessarily work chronologically, because they don't have to do. And in actual fact, our imaginary spiritual journey does tend to mean kind of jumping between the various different stages. So it's to be aware of that, that this is not necessarily a chronological thing. Um, all right, let's take it. They also it wouldn't be useful to sort of read about this and go, oh, I'm at stage one, I'm at stage two. That's not necessarily helpful. So I'd like you to see it in a much more holistic way. All right, so this is the manual, and it's question four, section one, A, and paragraph three. All right. First, they must go through what might be called a period of undoing. This need not be painful, but it usually is so experienced. It seems as if things are being taken away, and it is rarely understood initially that their lack of value is merely being recognized. How can lack of value be perceived unless the perceiver is in a position where he must see things in a different light? He is not yet at a point at which he can make the shift entirely internally. And so the plan will sometimes call for changes in what seem to be external circumstances. These changes are always helpful. When the teacher of God has learned that much, he goes on to the second stage. We're going to spend a bit of time on this. This is the beginning of the dark night of the soul. It's how it starts. Let's talk about what it means. This is a time of intense inner challenges and spiritual awakening. Now, the actual term of dark night of the soul was coined by St. John of the Cross. And he talked about the dark night of the soul in two stages. He called them the dark night of the senses and the dark night of the spirit. We're not going to talk about it the way John of the Cross talks about it. We're going to talk about it the way A Course in Miracles talks about it, because it has its own unique way of saying it. So this is always a time of feeling spiritually disconnected, disconnected from others, disconnected from yourself, and disconnected from life itself. It's a time when you may feel abandoned by God or by everyone else. Um, and that will be spiritually speaking. There's also, it could just as easily be precipitated, and often is, by worldly circumstances. So you find yourself in a dark night of the soul when there's a bereavement, a relationship breakup, losing a job or a pension, health problems, Anything at all can precipitate it. And we're going to find ourselves in a time of hopelessness, helplessness, confusion, feeling lost. There's a lack of motivation, lack of enthusiasm, and disconnection. I think what's interesting is the last sentence of this paragraph on the first stage. Well, let's say the last two. These changes are always helpful. When the teacher of God has learned that much, he goes on to the second stage. Now, there are very many people, Course in Miracles student, that never really get beyond the first stage. So what it's saying here is the only way out of the first stage, which we could call victimhood, is understanding that all things work together for good. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. There is no way out of the first stage of the dark night of the soul without surrender. See? Because the ego stands in judgment of all things working together for good. See? And it's just a thought system, it's not an entity. And it says that shouldn't have happened, that's not right, people shouldn't do that, that should never have been the case, that person should never have died, my husband should still be alive, my son should still be alive. You see? So the ego stands in judgment of all things always working together for good. What's the good? Awakening from the dream of death, spiritual awakening. Okay? Everything is working together for the good, always, at all times. It doesn't matter what's happening, it should be happening. All things are working together for good. There are no exceptions except in your ego's opinion. So the first thing a student of A Course in Miracles needs to learn is that all things work together for good, and there is never, ever an exception to that. So the way out of the first stage is surrender. It should be thus. It doesn't mean there's not awfulness going on inside of me. It doesn't mean there's not stark terror. It doesn't mean there's not pain. It doesn't mean there's not sadness. It doesn't mean any of that. But what it does mean is it should be thus. Everything else is ego. Everything else is imprisonment. Everything else is hopeless. Fighting against the dream is hopeless. Trying to control the dream is hopeless. But surrender to the Holy Spirit's purpose for the dream, which is you awakening from the dream of death, that's what matters. And that's what's necessary when you have an awful time in the world, apparently, in your ego's opinion. The way out is total surrender. You let go. That's the task of the Course in Miracles student, to understand all things are working together for good. All events are always helpful. When that's understood, doesn't mean the pain stops, doesn't mean the fear is gone, the confusion, the lack of coping mechanisms, the overwhelm, doesn't mean that's gone, but it does mean the world should be thus. Because in the Holy Spirit's classroom, absolutely everything should be exactly as it is, for the only thing that matters, which is the forgiveness process that will awaken me from a misidentification of what I am. The huge message, the Course in Miracles is very simple. It says, listen, this is a dream of death. Okay? The problem is what you are taking yourself to be is an illusion, an ego, an impossibly separate self that stands apart from your creator and from what everything and everyone else is, a me. That is the one problem and the one solution to all the problems you think you have, the problems of the me, is to undo your identification as a me, to awaken from the dream of me, the dream of limitation, the dream of birth and death, the dream of individuality. So, A Course in Miracles is a course on how you awaken from the dream of me, because that's the thing that hurts you. Okay, so that's why always everything is perfectly attuned for you to work these lessons and awaken from a painful, limited misidentification of what you are and share the truth of what you are with all your brothers. So, into every lifetime, there's going to come a dark night of the soul. And the way out of this first stage is to understand all things are working together for good. How do I know? Because there's no exceptions. Now, it will be very wrong to assume the Holy Spirit is putting crappy stuff in your life to wake you up. That's not true. All right. Consciousness, which is what the dreamer of the dream is, being wrong-minded, wrote the dream, which means nothing. It's an illusion. It has no meaning of its own, with the purpose of you staying asleep. Consciousness wrote the dream with the purpose of consciousness staying asleep, thinking itself a dream figure in its dream. That's the purpose of the dream in the ego thought system. Now, the Holy Spirit's purpose for the dream is, listen, you wrote this dream to hide your guilt in, to hide the wrongness you believe in. So it's going to happen just the way you wrote it, but we're going to reverse engineer it. We're going to use a process of forgiveness for you to see all the wrongness and belief and sin, guilt, and fear that's in your mind, because you're going to see it in the world that you made up. You see? So we need the world to be exactly how you wrote it, because that is what's going to show you the guilt in your mind you've hidden there, you've projected there. It has to be exactly the way you wrote it. It will be perfect because your guilt is perfectly hidden in plain sight at every moment in the world you made up to put it in. That's why the ego's dream of death has to be exactly what it is, that we can claim back the projections, own them in ourselves, forgive them, and have them undone. Until we see a forgiven world. And that means a world that's worlding, and there's no more sense of there being such a thing as wrong. No more is there a sense that shouldn't be happening. No more is there a sense people shouldn't do that. That's gone. When the mind is healed, it's the forgiven world. Okay, so let's continue with a little bit of discussion on this first stage of the dark night of the soul. It's completely necessary to have this stage. Completely necessary for this dark night of the soul. To begin undoing attachments to what happens in the world, which is completely necessary to peace and awakening. What's hiding the truth of what you are from you is the ego seeking and resisting, grasping and grievances, attachments and aversions. That's just a thought system in your mind. It's not you. But identification with it is veiling from you the salvation that's already in your mind. So on this subject of this dark night of the soul, being completely necessary. Let's take this from chapter 2, section 3, paragraph 3. The acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time. This may seem to contradict free will because of the inevitability of the final decision, but this is not so. You can temporize and you're capable of enormous procrastination, but you cannot depart entirely from your creator, who set the limits on your ability to miscreate. An imprisoned will, which means a separate will, a me's will, which is in conflict with all the other me's and in conflict with God, who wills perfect oneness. So an imprisoned will, which is an imaginary will, the me, engenders a situation which in the extreme becomes altogether intolerable. Tolerance for pain may be high, but it is not without limit. Eventually, everyone begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be another way. As this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. This ultimately reawakens spiritual vision, simultaneously weakening the investment in physical sight. Okay, so let's talk about what we said there, which is the ego's purpose for the illusion that means nothing. This is from lesson 55. I do not know what anything is for. To me, ego identified, meing, the purpose of everything is to prove that my illusions about myself are real. That I'm separate, that I have a past, that I have a future, that I'm surrounded by others, guilty, the lot of them, the cause of my pain. Okay? The whole enchilada. To me, the purpose of everything is to prove that my illusions about myself are real, my misidentification as a separate self. It is for this purpose that I attempt to use everyone and everything. It is for this that I believe the world is for. It's for the me to find pleasure and the me to resist and push away what it has a grievance with. It's for the me to find happiness in and to blame for its unhappiness, instead of understanding all the pain comes from the decision to me, to get involved in the ego thought system and misperceive myself. So it's for this that I believe the world is for. Seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, grasping and grievances, special love and special hate. Therefore, I do not recognize its real purpose, the world. The purpose I've given the world has led to a frightening picture of it. Let me open my mind to the world's real purpose by withdrawing the one I have given it and learning the truth about it. And the truth about it is, well, let's take a quote. Chapter 30, section 5, paragraph 1. The real world is the state of mind in which the only purpose of the world is seen to be forgiveness. So when you're meing, you think the purpose of the world is that all your relatives should be in perfect health, that all your loved ones continue to live, that your financial circumstances should be good, that you keep your job, that people think well of you, that you have power, that you have influence, that you have friends, that you have a happy marriage. When you're meing, when you've accepted the ego's purpose for the world, which is that it's not for forgiveness, it's for the satisfaction of the me. You see, that means you're meing. You're identified as an ego. You don't know what the world is for because you think it's for something other than forgiveness. You think it's for your happiness. You think it's for seeking in and grasping at and pushing away and grasping towards you in a desperate hope to fix the me abomination that can't be happy. And so the me is, as the Course says, seeking but never finding, always chasing a moving goalpost. I could be happy if, I would be happy if only, I will be happy when, and it never comes. Because the misidentification is the cause of all pain. What you take yourself to be is the root of all suffering. Then, misidentified, you will use the world as something to blame for how awful it is to be me instead of your own decision to me. That's what's being said here. That's the purpose of the world, is to awaken from the me delusion, to awaken from the wrong mind itself. That's the only purpose the world has. See, so if you're listening to this, if you're reading these paragraphs as an ego, you'll go, what the hell do you mean this is necessary? Why did my husband have to die? Why did my child have to die? Why was crime visited on our family? Why was this disaster visited on my family? If you're listening to this as an ego, you're going, what do you mean this is necessary? If you're meing, you go, what the hell do you mean? Why does my body have to be sick? Why was I born with a disability? You see? Because from the perspective of the me, the world isn't for forgiveness. The world isn't for awakening. No, the world is for seeking but never finding to make the me happy. And how dare anything not line up the way I want and need to try to save the me, to try and push its pain aside and have a reprieve from the suffering that separateness brings. But A Course in Miracles is relentless. The only purpose the world has is forgiveness. It does not have any other purpose except in your ego's opinion, and that's nonsense. See, here's the thing. The world means nothing because an illusion is an illusion is an illusion. It can't be good or bad or right or wrong. It's just nothing. But there are two purposes, the ego's purpose and the Holy Spirit's purpose. Neither of those purposes are about the me finding happiness. Neither. The ego's purpose for the world is that you keep misidentification, you keep identifying as a false self, a me, but you have something else to blame except yourself for the suffering. So the ego script, the ego wrote the script so you would be an innocent victim. See? Because that's exactly what the ego thought system wants. You get to keep the me, you keep the misidentification as an ego, but now you can blame all the things that are victimizing the me. You can go, well, the guilt's not in me. I'm not responsible for this suffering. It's out there. It's not in me. The world was the attempt to keep separateness and suffering as real. Sin, guilt, and fear is real. They're not real. But the world was the attempt to keep the lie because it proves there's a separate self. It proves the ego is true. Guilt is the proof God was attacked. Fear is the proof that God was attacked because he's going to come back for his pound of flesh. So we made those up, and the ego needs them to be true because it's the only proof that says, no, there really is an ego. No, there's not. But the ego needs this lie that sin is real, guilt is real, and fear is real to prove there's an ego, to prove something flew in the face of God, destroyed his non duality, tore heaven asunder. It didn't, because this is all fantasy, because there is no separate self. It's a delusion. It's a misidentification. It's a very painful mistake in what you take yourself to be. So the ego's script is all about you being victimized, the imaginary me. That's what it's for. So the ego doesn't want you to ever find, because you see, there's no happiness for the me to find, because the me is the rejection of happiness. So the ego just wrote a script where there's no happiness ever to be found, but there's loads of things to blame. If that tragedy didn't happen, if my loved ones lived longer, if my health had been better, people treated me better, see? So that's the ego script. It's all about that. Well, the Holy Spirit's going to use the same script. See? So the ego script is automatically going to cause you to suffer as an innocent victim because you lost your job, because the pension is gone, because the relationship broke up, because your loved one died. See, it's going to do that all by itself because there's no happy endings here. Everything dies, everything falls apart. See, there's no lasting happiness here. See, it wasn't written that way. It was written so there was stuff to blame for an incurable unhappiness of the ego, the separate self identity, what the world's for. So the Holy Spirit's going to use the same script, but is going to undo your victimhood, is going to undo the sin, guilt, and fear that you see in the mind. You're going to look at it where it is, in the mind that's looking at the world, and have it undone through your forgiveness of it. See? So the script's just going to play out the way the ego wrote it, but this time we're watching it with a different teacher. So all this is going to happen. All this has to happen. So again, it's in chapter 4, section 5, paragraph 1. All things work together for good. All right. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. The way the world whirls will be perfectly attuned for your next lesson in awakening from the dream of death, the dream of separateness, the dream of individuality, which is the cause of all your suffering. Okay. The Holy Spirit's never going to teach you that your salvation is for the world to be a certain way. That's what the ego wants. That's the ego's lie. That's the seek but never find. The Holy Spirit's, that's not the lesson you're going to learn on your journey of awakening and this development of trust. So on that, this is chapter 31, section 4, paragraph 1. There is a tendency to think the world can offer consolation and escape from problems that its purpose is to keep. What are the problems the world keeps? That sin is real, separateness is real, guilt is real, and fear is real. The world was made to keep those problems. Because now it can be seen outside, apparently, instead of inside. So there's a tendency then, you see, to think that if things happen in the world, if things go a certain way, the way your ego is trying to manipulate it to try to save itself, that somehow problems can be solved. But actually, the whole world is here to keep the only problems there are, which is the belief in separateness and guilt and fear. So why should this be so? Because it is a place where choice among illusions seems to be the only choice. Which illusion is best? Which illusory opinion about myself should I go with? Which illusory opinion about what I am? Which illusory self-concept should I choose? Which illusory thing should I do in the illusory world to try to medicate the pain of the me? So it's a place where choice amongst illusions seems to be the only choice. And you are in control of outcomes of your choosing. Thus you think, within the narrow band from birth to death, A little time is given you to use for you alone. A time when everyone conflicts with you, the me, the separate self. But you can choose which road will lead you out of conflict and away from difficulties that concern you not. Yet they are your concern. How then can you escape from them by leaving them behind? What must go with you, you will take with you whatever road you choose to walk along. It doesn't matter which road the me takes to try to save itself. You've brought the me object with you, which is the cause of all your pain. It doesn't matter if the me joins a monastery. It doesn't matter if the me surrounds itself with loads of friends. It doesn't matter if the me rejects the world for its spiritual development. You've brought along with you the thing that hurts you, the me misidentification. It can't be medicated. The me is the suffering. Must go with you, your misidentification. You will take with you whatever road you choose to walk along. So real choice is no illusion, but the world has none to offer, no real choice. All its roads but lead to disappointment and nothingness and death. If you're meing, well, the script is written, so everything turns to nothingness, everything is dissatisfying, and everything dies. That's how it's written. So if you're meing, it's hopeless. If the me lives long enough, it'll get to see everyone it cares about die. There's no happy endings, not in the world's roads, not once you keep the me. There is no choice in its alternatives. Seek not escape from problems here. The world was made that problems could not be escaped. Be not deceived by all the different names its roads are given. They have but one end, and each is but the means to gain that end. For it is here that all its roads will lead, however differently they seem to start, however differently they seem to go. Their end is certain, for there is no choice among them. All of them will lead to death. Because you've kept the thing that will die as an illusion of yourself, the me. When the body's death comes, you'll think it's you. On some you travel gaily for a while, before the bleakness enters. And on some the thorns are felt at once. The choice is not what will the ending be, but when it comes, when will it turn to ashes? It's not what will the ending be, it will be when will everything turn to dirt? When will it all collapse? When will the whole foundations fall out from under everything I'm trying to build to save the me? The roads this world can offer seem to be quite large in number, but the time must come when everyone begins to see how like they are to one another. Men have died on seeing this, because they saw no way except the pathways offered by the world, and learning they led nowhere, lost their hope. Sound familiar? This is the dark night of the soul. And yet it was at this time they could have learned their greatest lesson. All must reach this point and go beyond it. It is true indeed. There is no choice at all within the world. But this is not the lesson in itself. The lesson has a purpose. And in this, you come to understand what it is for. So, yes, the dark night of the soul is necessary. At some point, everyone reaches a place where they can no longer fool themselves and go, I would be happy if, I could be happy if only. If only that didn't happen, I know I would be happy. See, at some stage, the lie loses its credibility. Thank God. And that's the dark night of the soul. The realization that it's totally hopeless here as a me. Misidentified, there's no hope. And that is where salvation is born. The dark night of the soul. So let's say a little bit more about this first stage. So we said it's completely necessary. That's what the course is saying. It's necessary to reach this point and go, you know something? I have been seeking all my life and blaming everything else for a happiness or its lack. And it's not holding water with me anymore. There's something much more fundamentally wrong. Everyone has to reach this point. And of course, this is the birthplace of the happy learner because they realize they're miserable. And now they're willing to be taught that there's another way. And the dark night of the soul, when everything crumbles, that's the beginning. So this is completely necessary to see the ego's lie. So it's completely necessary because we're now going to learn that it is the very act of seeking pleasure in the world to gratify the me and our grievances with it on behalf of the me that are veiling the peace and joy of what we are as God created his son. So it's all falling apart. This can feel like the complete destruction of everything you ever thought yourself to be, and the complete failure of all your old coping mechanisms to get you through things. This stage, like all stages, is temporary. And again, the way out of this stage has to be surrender, acceptance, understanding that all things work together for good, not for the me. The ego wrote the script so the me would be victimized, lose everything it cared about, everything it cared about die, seek but never find. See, so the world is not all things working together for the me at all. Quite the contrary, it was written so the me could feel innocent as a victim instead of guilty as the victimizer of God. So it doesn't work, all things together do not work together for the me, but they work together for awakening from the misidentification as a me. We must learn surrender and acceptance of what is, knowing its only purpose is awakening from the dream of death. The purpose of the world is not to be a happy me, to be a happy ego, to be a happy person or a holy person. It's not for anything like that. That won't work. It is to awaken from the dream of death. That's the only purpose the world has. Everything else is the ego's lies. It will turn to ashes and it will facilitate the dark night of the soul. Thank God. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my dark night of the soul. Um, Everyone's will be a little bit different. So hold this lightly. Um, I had started to notice something weird for really no good reason whatsoever. I noticed that I had always had a certain poise. There was always an ability to hold to what I would have called an inner strength. Um, and it was something people tended to respect, and it tends to engender loyalty. Um, I can only talk about this afterwards when it fell away. Um, because what I started to notice, and this was maybe for a 6 month period in advance of the great crash, it wasn't there anymore. There wasn't a sense of a place in my mind that there was confidence. And whereas I would have spoke kind of very honestly and directly and didn't care what anyone thought, I started to notice weird little incidences where I did, where I felt inadequate, um, where it was almost there was a neediness there that hadn't been there. Um, I don't mean I was never needy, but I just mean in the context of interacting with friends. It was weird. And then I didn't quite get a sense of that spiritual connection that was always there for me in my life. It was much more fleeting. It was much more nebulous. It was much more, you know, it, it wasn't there as strong as it was. And I noticed this for a few months. Um, and again, the natural confidence I had, which didn't really care what anyone thought, um, it wasn't there anymore. And there was friendships I thought would never fall apart, and they did. And it kind of hit me hard. Um, so there was this kind of slide that I started to notice. Now, around this time, I was doing quite a lot of spiritual work. Um, and I remember meditating one time, and I remember finding like anxiety, fear. It's like, wow, that's weird. But after the meditation was over, I didn't think anything about it. But afterwards, there was a few times that I would meditate, and there was fear there, which I thought was weird, but didn't understand. Um, and then there was perfect storm because I started having health problems, and it kept getting misdiagnosed, and I had gone deaf in both ears, like with practically no hearing left. Um, and then I got prescribed something, and that precipitated like massive anxiety, like I'd never felt before in my whole life, and skin problems. Eventually, when it was diagnosed properly after weeks and the stress of keeping on going to different doctors and trying to get someone who knew what was happening and what was going on. And then eventually there was this steroid spray that was recommended for rhinitis. Um, and it was almost like psychosis, and it was sort of terrifying. Um, and at the same time, my work life and home life at that time, this is many, 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 many years ago, um, became filled with huge conflict. Um, And and then anxiety was here to stay. Um, it never left. It was there from first thing in the morning until I went to bed at night. When I would go to bed at night, every time I closed my eyes to try and sleep, my body would convulse. If I tried to meditate, my body would convulse. I had to distract myself constantly. I had to constantly shake my leg or tap my fingers or push a fist into my solar plexus because that was the only thing that would distract me from the heart palpitations, which were terrifying. The way it would skip a beat. Um, and that kind of led to um, many years of kind of pretty much withdrawing from all of my social contacts, um, never meeting up with friends, overeating, putting on huge amounts of weight. Um, it is the loneliest time I've ever known in my entire life. Because I would say to people, this is just relentless. It's here constantly. But people would just go, you just need to think positive. And that was the loneliest thing. Every time, and please don't get me wrong, other people, when they told me they had anxiety in the past, I would have said, you just need to be positive. You just need to think positively. You just need to do some spirituality. Everything will be fine. Okay. But being on the receiving end of that, where nothing works, and where there was this terrible need in me for someone to say to me, my God, that sounds awful. But it just felt like no one got it. It just felt like I couldn't explain it to anyone just how awful it was, how it was relentless, how it never stopped. Um, Please don't think everyone has to experience this. They don't. This is just my dark night of the soul. Okay. But I just want to be honest and tell you about how mine worked because it's illustrative. Um, so it was like that probably for um, about 4 years. Because another thing that happened at the time was that I had been in a relationship with my present husband, it has to be said, but he had gone back to Brazil. We had only met when he was studying in Ireland, and then he had gone. So that was another contributing factor to the perfect storm, and everything just falling apart. And I had no internal resources. All those resources I had in the past, everyone would have always said Keith is a strong person, Keith's a self-reliant person, Keith's a very poised person, he's always, he can think positively. All those old resources that I had, they just collapsed. None of them worked. Um, so it was awful. Those first 4 years are, it's difficult even for me to talk about it in the sense that it feels like it's a different life or it's somebody else's life, but it was, it was hell. Um, okay. So, I think we said enough about that. You get the picture, It's bleak, right? Um, Now for the next 4 years, I started to, well, my husband came back. We got married. We were living together. The anxiety was still awful, but it meant I kind of started contributing, participating in life more. It was still an effort to do anything. The anxiety will be overwhelming in all situations. But I did. I went to the gym. That helped. In the beginning, it would feel like I was going to have a heart attack when I did it's because of the heart thing. Again, that was just in my mind, but it felt that way. But I persisted with it, and that was a really great focus. We did it together, so that was a good thing to do as a couple. I lost the weight, but the anxiety was still awful. I still had to go to sleep at night time, like shaking my foot because I needed and pushing my fist into my solar plexus. Because if I didn't, then the heart palpitations would just terrify me and I'd be awake all night. And each time I tried to sleep, I would just have to go through about maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 cycles of, when you fall asleep and you suddenly get that jump. Um, everyone gets that from time to time. But it would happen 15 or 20 times before I was finally exhausted enough to sleep. So that's just what we're talking about. Um, that was my dark night of the soul. Every resource I ever thought I had for coping with life, every strength that I thought I had, every wile that I thought that I had, it was gone. It just the foundation fell out of everything, and there was nothing. Um, so I guess that was 8 years for me. So that's a dark night of the soul. Um, Maybe for somebody else, it's just going to be the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, the loss of an income. Um, it could be anything. But there does tend to be this sense of like hopelessness. There does tend to be this sense of what's the point? You know, nothing really works. Um, and we're all going to have to experience these events in our life because that's how it's written. Um, and that's the quotation that we covered earlier on. Um, was one occurred to me there. Let me see if I can think what I was going to say. Yeah, let me find it now. Yeah. The roads this world can offer seem to be quite large in number. Fame, financial stability, security, a home, a lover, family, you know. But the time must come when everyone begins to see how like they all are to one another. Temporary, fragile, inadequate, dissatisfying. And then the next line, men have died on seeing this because they saw no way except the pathways offered by the world. Well, that was kind of what I reached. I didn't see any way of fixing it. There wasn't anything in my mind where I went, but if I could just do this in the world, or if I had this in the world, or blah blah blah, that wasn't there. It wasn't there anymore. So that paragraph is about the fact that people come to this point in their life, and for many, suicide is the answer. And all of our lives have been touched by the tragedy of suicide. So the Course in Miracles is not putting any bones about it. It says to look at the truth of the ego's dream of death is stark. It's stark. To realize that there really isn't any hope here, trying to manipulate the world. It should be this, it shouldn't be this, if I can get this, if I can get that. To see, something, none of this is going to work. That's dark. That is the dark night of the soul. And the Course is saying for many, suicide is what they consider in this situation. And yet, learning these roads lead nowhere, losing their hope. And yet, this was the time they could have learned their greatest lesson, almost reach this point and go beyond it. It is true indeed that there's no choice at all within the world. It's hopeless. But this is not the lesson in itself. The lesson has a purpose. And in this, you come to understand what it is for, what the world is for. It's for awakening, it's for discovering the truth of who you are, the peace and the joy of which is completely independent to the roads of the world. The truth of what you are, the world can add nothing to it and can never take it away. That's the lesson. The lesson doesn't end with the world is hopeless. It's not where the lesson ends. Having learned that lesson, you're ready for the other way. Now that you realize that all the grasping and grievances of the me, the special love and the special hate, the pushing and the pulling, now that you've learned that won't work, you're ready to address the actual problem, which is the misidentification. And that's the lesson. That's the invitation to the Holy Spirit. The light in your mind that you still are. That's the invitation to begin letting go of the identification with something you're not and learning of what you are. So I would anticipate, I have the sun on my face here. Let me close my curtains for a moment. Right, I'm back. It's better. I would anticipate that it's possible outside of the normal lunatics that listen to this channel. Um, I think it's entirely possible that there would be some people watching this channel for the first time based on the fact that it covers the dark night of the soul. So, what I want to say is it's perfectly normal to reach this point. It's perfectly healthy to reach this point. And it is the entryway to salvation. It is only by reaching this point where you're not fooling yourself anymore that the opportunity to discover the truth of what you are, which is what everyone is, um, becomes open as the other way. Right, I think we've said enough about the first stage. Let's move on to the second. Next, the teacher of God must go through a period of sorting out. This is always somewhat difficult because having learned that the changes in his life are always helpful, he must. Now, that's acceptance. You're not fighting with life anymore. You're not saying, look what life did to me, the innocent victim. This should never have happened. This isn't right. Oh, it should never have gone. That's gone. See, if you're a student of A Course in Miracles, that's the first thing that has to go. Acceptance, surrender. Everything is always exactly the way it should be. Remember, that's the only way out of stage one. Acceptance, surrender. This is always somewhat difficult because having learned that the changes in his life are always helpful, he must now decide all things on the basis of whether they increase the helpfulness or hamper it. He will find that many, if not most, of the things he valued before will merely hinder his ability to transfer what he has learned to new situations as they arise. I remember after I had an awakening, the initial awakening, not claiming enlightenment, the initial awakening. Um, I remember having such gratitude that there was peace in my mind again, because for 8 years there was none. It was just relentless static of doom, which just never stopped. Um, and and I remember when and everyone gets this lovely honeymoon period when it's really awakening from thought identification and understanding that what you are is completely independent of thought, the ego's thought world. Um, and when it happens, everyone gets this lovely period, which could be 2 weeks or 2 months, or the longest someone told me they had it was a year. Um, but there's this lovely honeymoon period where there's just this flow state where there's no opposition to anything. Everything can be however it wants, and there's just peace here. And and you're not really getting involved in thoughts or anything like that. And you seem to work on intuition, not on analysis or getting involved in thoughts. Anyway, so it's a lovely honeymoon period. It's a period of pure grace. And So I remember when this hit, I just had this, it had started as peace in my mind, and then it just started to shine as love. Um, and and I had so much gratitude. It was just, it was surreal, especially after the hell of the anxiety. And I remember in my mind, I would just say, but 8 years. All I had to realize was that what I am is independent of thought. All I had to realize was the truth of what I am is awareness. And that awareness only ever needed to be aware of itself, independent of thought. Um, and it was like 8 years. What a waste. So what I hadn't done yet was I hadn't forgiven the anxiety. Okay. That sort of didn't occur to me at the time. But there was also, again, like I say, there's intuition available to you when you're not getting involved in thoughts. Um, and so I had this practice with all my philosophical questions and all my some questions about where I was at in terms of my path. I would throw it up into the silence in my mind and wait for it to come back as an answer. Not necessarily straight away. I set no um, expectations on it. It would come through in the right place, in the right time, in the right way, and it always would. Um, but I remember one day just having this mad gratitude, and then I was going, I should ask about the 8 years. So that was my question. 8 years. 8 years. Like in the desert. And this was such a simple realization. And so I threw that up and waited for an answer. And it actually came back straight away. It says, that's how long it took you to realize that the me couldn't be fixed. I was like, oh my God, that is absolutely true. I had spent those 8 years looking for a way to fix the me, to fix the conceptual identity, fix the insane voice talking to itself in my mind that I called me, to medicate it, to find some medical answer to it, to find some situation in the world, to do some kind of practice that would fix it or make it better. And honestly, it wasn't until I had exhausted all of those roads um, that I was ready to uh, have that invitation to the Holy Spirit for the other way. Okay, let's continue with our reading. He will find that many, if not most, of the things he valued before will merely hinder his ability to transfer what he has learned to new situations as they arise. And that's why I told you that story about that's how long it took you to realize that it wasn't about getting the me's ability to stay on top of things or the me's ability to manipulate situations or people or the me's ability to feel to have a good um, self-concept instead of a bad self-concept in inverted commas. So nothing that worked in the past is going to be helpful because he has valued what is really valueless, which is the roads of the world, relationships, substances, experiences, possessions, say, the roads of the world, all of which lead to death, the death of the me. Because he has valued what is really valueless, the roads that lead nowhere, he will not generalize the lesson for fear of loss and sacrifice. See, when you're meing and you hear this teaching misidentified as the me, this sounds like sacrifice. Sounds like I'm being asked to let something go as a me. Sounds like there's pleasures I should be pursuing, and this is being denied to me. See? And that's not it at all. Um, that's when you keep the misidentification as the me. It seems like you're being told, well, this is not going to work, and you shouldn't do that, and you should do this, and this is what you see. That it's heard that way because of the misidentification. But that's not the teaching. Actually, the teaching is the thing you let go of isn't the things the me wants. You let go of the me. That's what you relinquish. And in return, you gain eternity. But when we're meing, seems like, oh, these are pleasurable things. I think I should be doing these, but I feel guilty about them, and I'm being asked to sacrifice them. And that's not what the Course in Miracles is saying at all. In fact, it spells it out so clearly in so many places. You cannot change your mind, what you take yourself to be. You cannot change your mind by changing your behavior, but you can change your mind. You can utterly shift that which you take yourself to be. And this is the other way. It's not about changing behavior. It's not about sacrificing things in the world, you see. But again, in this initial stage where we're gathering information, where we're learning about the Course's metaphysics, after we've understood that the world is always how it should be, now we're ready to learn deeper into the metaphysics about grievances, about forgiveness, you see. But at this point, there's still the belief in sacrifice. Look what I'm missing out on. Look what the me is missing out on. But the Course isn't asking you to have the me miss out on anything. It's asking you to understand that the me is the problem. The only reason there's a desire for the roads of the world that lead nowhere is because of the me's pain. Now there's a desire to avoid pain and seek pleasure, to try to medicate the me. Okay. That's what it means by sacrifice. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. It is only to the extent to which they are helpful that any degree of reality should be accorded them in this world of illusion. The word value can apply to nothing else. The only value to the world, and it's a great value, is that it facilitates the forgiveness process that allows you to awaken from the painful misidentification as the me, the ego, the separate self. The world has no other value. In itself, it's meaningless, but this holy purpose makes the world holy. Its sole purpose is for forgiveness in order to awaken from the dream of death, to awaken from belief that you are the thing that was born and will die. The ego. As lesson 93 says, the self you made that is not the Son of God, and nothing it thinks or does means anything. It is neither bad nor good. It's unreal and nothing more than that. Awakening from that misidentification is the only value the world has, but it is a great value. And it makes the world, the illusion of the world, holy by that holy purpose. So a few quotes just in terms of that. All things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. Only to the extent to which they are helpful for forgiveness, that any degree of reality should be accorded them. So this is from chapter 29, section 6, paragraph 5. This world will bind your feet and tie your hands and kill your body, only if you think that it was made to crucify God's Son. See, it has a different purpose. It's not for forgiveness, to awaken from the me. The ego says, no, the world is the cause of your pain. See, look what it's doing to you. You're an innocent victim. That's the ego's script. So the world will bind your feet and tie your hands and kill your body if you're meing, if you're staying in ego, if you want to keep the thing that is the cause of all your pain, which is your separate self identity. The world will seem to bind the feet and tie the hands of the me and kill the body of the me only if you think it was made to crucify God's Son. For even though it was a dream of death, you need not let it stand for this to you. See, it can have a different purpose. The same dream of death can have a different purpose. Let this be changed, and nothing in the world must be changed as well. For nothing here is defined as what you see it for. How lovely is the world whose purpose is forgiveness of God's Son. How free from fear, how filled with blessing and with happiness, and what a joyous thing it is to dwell a little while in such a happy place. The same dream of death, when the purpose shifts, when the dark night comes, and we realize I can't use the world for happiness. Me is broken. Nothing is going to fix it. See, now we get to shift the purpose. It doesn't matter what's happening, it's always perfect. Grievance is never justified, ever. Grievances arise on behalf of the false self, the me, the ego. The minute I understand this is about awakening me from the thing that is the cause of my pain, the me, and it's perfect. One by one, it shows me all my fixations as an ego. And I get to bring all of them to forgiveness in my mind. So this is from chapter 29, section 7, paragraph 1. Seek not outside yourself in the roads of the world. Seek not relationships. Well, do if you want to, but this is saying they won't work. They won't fix the me. The me will never be anything other than dissatisfied and a victim, blaming everything but itself for its unhappiness. Seek not outside yourself, for all your pain comes simply from a futile search for what you want, insisting where it must be found. What if it's not there? Do you prefer that you be right or happy? Be you glad that you are told where happiness abides and seek no longer elsewhere. You will fail. But it is given you to know the truth and not to seek for it outside of yourself. This is why the dark night of the soul has to come. To realize my mistake was the seeking. The seeking has to stop. I have to discover the truth of what I am through the forgiveness of the world. So let's talk about stage 3. He will find that many, if not most, of the things he valued before will merely hinder his ability to transfer what he has learned to new situations as they arise. Because he has valued what is really valueless, he will not generalize the lesson for fear of sacrifice. Oh, we did this, did we? Deja vu there, maybe not. He will not generalize the lesson for fear of loss and sacrifice. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. It is only to the extent to which they are helpful that any degree of reality should be accorded them in this world of illusion. The word value can apply to nothing else. The third stage through which the teacher of God must go can be called a period of relinquishment. If this is interpreted as giving up the desirable, it will engender enormous conflict. See, if you hear this and it's telling you you must give up relationships, you must give up jobs, you must give up wealth, you must give up your house, you must if it's heard that way, it's going to cause huge conflict. Few teachers of God escape this distress entirely. There is, however, no point in sorting out the valuable from the valueless until the next obvious step is taken. Therefore, the period of overlap is apt to be one in which the teacher of God feels called upon to sacrifice his own best interests on behalf of truth. He has not realized as yet how wholly impossible such a demand would be. See, there's the belief in sacrifice. I have to just accept these things. I have to accept that my lover left me. I have to accept that my husband died. I have to accept that my child died. I have to accept that my pension's gone. Teacher of God feels called upon to sacrifice his own best interests. What about my righteous indignation? What about my righteous wrath? What about my innocent victimhood? What about the me? How is this fair on the me? See, it seems like I'm being asked to forgo and sacrifice the best interests of the me. But he has not yet realized how wholly impossible such a demand would be. He's not yet realized what gifts await when the me is relinquished. There's still the concern about what's in it for the me. What about the me's rights? See? And, what's the me being asked to sacrifice? This isn't fair. This isn't right. Why should I have to sacrifice anything as me? See? And the course is going, oh, you've no idea. You've no idea. The me is the real sacrifice. The me is veiling from you the Son of God. The me is veiling from you the peace that surpasses all understanding, that is your birthright and absolutely inseparable from the truth of what you are. Now, because you're meing, you don't know what's thrown away. You don't know the cost of meing. And now you're worrying, what does the me have to lose? What does the me have to give up? And of course, it's going, you've no idea. You've no idea what that me is costing you. And you've no idea the joy that awaits you when it falls away. Of course, it's going, the idea of sacrifice is ridiculous, but you don't know that yet. He has not realized as yet how wholly impossible such a demand would be, the demand that there be sacrifice. No sacrifice is asked. Everything is given to you when you let go of the thing that caused all the sacrifice. He can learn this only as he actually does give up the valueless. Through this, he learns that where he anticipated grief, he finds a happy lightheartedness instead. Where he thought something was asked of him, he finds a gift bestowed on him. So, a quick recap. The first stage is where everything falls apart. None of the old egoic coping mechanisms work. This is the dark night of the soul. Stage 2 is where you start learning what's valuable and what's valueless. The course is going, what's valueless is that identification as an ego, as a separate self. What's valueless is grievances. What's valueless is fighting with the world, going, it shouldn't have happened. This should never have happened. The course is going, that's valueless. What's valuable is surrender and acceptance. What's valuable is forgiveness. See? But to the me is going, but this isn't right. I was messed around. This isn't, that should never have happened. And the course is going, no, that's valueless. Why don't you let that go? Why don't you forget? And the me is horrified, going, I have to sacrifice like this? I have to forget about my rights? See? And the course is going, yeah, but why don't you just trust this course and see if it works? Because this course is saying that if you practice this forgiveness process of A Course in Miracles, you're going to discover something inside of you, a peace, no matter what circumstances you're in. So, yes, this seems like you're being called to sacrifice. Yes, you've every right to keep shouting and roaring and fighting with everyone and hating them and wanting to get even and wanting your, yes, 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 I know. The me feels terribly like it has to sacrifice to not have that. Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you try this? This is what's valuable. None of that stuff's not working for you. You're miserable. At least be willing to try another way, which is the forgiveness process of A Course in Miracles. In order to discover something inside of you, something that transcends the body, the world, thoughts, feelings, and stories, sensations, if you practice this forgiveness, this allowing all things to be exactly as they are, this acceptance, this surrender of judgment, knowing everything is as it should be for what you're here to do, which is awaken. If you just practice this, yes, it seems like you're being asked to sacrifice something, but watch. There's a gift. And there is. So for me, when I reached my lowest point, I was like, for up until the anxiety disorder, spirituality was the most important thing in my life. Did I neglect it? Hell yes. Did I do forgiveness properly? Hell no. Did I want to do it properly? Hell no. Right? I love the Course in Miracles. I love the metaphysics. I love fighting with people online about what it meant and what it didn't mean and why they were wrong and why I was right. Okay. So I did all that crap of the holy ego, right? But did I want to do forgiveness? No. No, I did not. That was sacrifice. I was like, these people look what they have done to me. God has no right to ask me to forgive that. And there's no way I'm gonna. See? Anyway, when I reached my lowest point, when I realized nothing else would work, I was like, this is all I have left. Is this spirituality was, I knew from the time I was a kid, this was the most important thing in life. Um, it was completely absent for 8 years. I couldn't even think about it. And I just decided, okay, it's this or bust. Anxiety be damned. I'm doing this. Um, and I decided I was going to listen to Kenneth Wapnick. I was going to learn this properly, exactly what you do and how you do it. And so I started reading and listening to Ken Wapnick all the time. And I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. That's stage two. Stage one is the shit show, where everything falls apart. Stage two is you learn what you're going to do. Okay. And stage three is where you start doing it. That's the first three stages. These are difficult stages. Stage two is telling you, well, you can't be happy and have your grievances. That's valueless. Learning that's hard. You're someone that had your pension swindled. You were robbed by a Ponzi scheme. Your child died. This is saying you're not entitled to your grievances. They have no value. See, that's painful to learn. We've all spent our whole lives surviving on grievances and seeking for a future happiness that will never come. So that's challenging. You know, if you want out of the dark night of the soul, you're going to have to learn that these grievances have to go. You have to work forgiveness. And this implementation stage, stage three, this is tough as well, because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where life happenings, awfulness, pain comes up in me, apparently in response to situations. And I don't get to react. I have to own this as my darkness that the world is blessing me by showing me. And I have to be fully present with the darkness that comes in total forgiveness of it and without blaming the world for it. That's what the implementation looks like. That's what stage three is. That's your implementation. That's tough. When you spend your whole life, awfulness, inadequacy, pain comes up in you, you've spent your whole life lashing out at everyone else over it, blaming what other people are doing for how unhappy you are. So, this third step, this isn't a picnic by a long shot. You know, you've survived your whole life on telling yourself you're an innocent victim. That's your coping mechanism. I'm an innocent victim. And people shouldn't do this. And that should never have happened to me. And I would have been happy if only. And I could be happy if. You spent your whole life doing that. You don't get to do that anymore. That's tough. That means I am fully responsible for my mind, not the world, not the past, not the future. I am responsible for what's in my mind. The world is not doing it to me, it's showing it to me. It is blessing me with the opportunity to see what's here and be fully present with it, totally forgiving of it, without any stories about it. So these are difficult stages. These are difficult stages. So again, I can only speak to you to illustrate it from my point of view in terms of A Dark Night of the Soul was that I learned from Kenneth Wapnick. We've always talked about it, Ken's metaphor of being in the cinema with Jesus. It's exactly the same metaphor as the Course uses for being above the battleground with Jesus. So I literally would spend all day going, okay, that body, those thoughts, those feelings, that's the movie. That's the battleground. And my job is not how do I get rid of it? How do I fix it? How do I change it? I know that doesn't work. My job is how good can I get at forgiving the movie? The body, the thoughts, the feelings, the stories. How good can I get at the total forgiveness of it in order to learn the truth of what I am in the cinema with Jesus? Metaphor was very helpful to me. That's your practice. That's your practice. That, the Course says, what's happening in your mind is a wild illusion, frantic and distraught with no reality to itself whatsoever. It is the self you made that's not the Son of God, and nothing it thinks or does means anything. It's neither good nor bad, it's unreal and nothing more than that. But I spent my whole life calling it me, this insane voice. But it's desperate seeking for approval and success in the world to try and not feel so awful about itself, and its venomous hatred. This wild illusion, frantic and distraught, called me, with its anxiety and its fears and its worries and its insecurities. So now the practice is, well, that's the movie. But what's in the cinema with Jesus? What sees the movie with no judgment of it? That's forgiveness. You look at the wild illusion, frantic and distraught with no reality whatsoever, and you understand that's not you. I was ready for that. I knew the me couldn't be fixed. So I did it. I would spend the whole day going, okay, look at the anxiety and doom and gloom and fear and self-hatred in the wrong mind. So what? Acceptance, surrender, forgiveness. I would spend all day doing that. This is the blessing of suffering, was that the anxiety was so bad that literally all day long it was a nightmare. So I would spend the whole day going, okay, here is the ego's show. Here is the false self. Here is the imaginary me, the wild illusion, frantic and distraught. Here it is, and it can be exactly as it wants to. I will allow it to be exactly as it is. I will stop pushing and pulling on it. I will stop saying, oh, it shouldn't be like this, and I should change it, and I should fix it, and this is not what I'm going to stop all that. And my only job is to get better every day at forgiving it. So that was my stage 3, you see. So let's move on to the 4th stage. Well, let's say before we do, through this is the last line in terms of stage 3 before we move on to stage 4. Through this, he learns that where he anticipated grief, he finds a happy lightheartedness instead, where he thought something was asked of him. The forgiveness of the anxiety, instead of blaming the world for it or the body for it. He finds a gift bestowed on him. And I did. After about 2 months of this, and I was doing this constantly. Um, I remember turning to my husband and going, I think the anxiety is getting better. I said that even though there was still anxiety there, because something else was here that was completely missing for 8 years. There was a stillness in the back of my mind, even in the midst of the anxiety, even in the midst of the awful thoughts, even in the midst of panic attacks. There was a stillness that was in the back of my mind that had been gone for 8 years. That's the gift that's bestowed. Something invulnerable is bestowed. A light, a stillness, something that has nothing to do with thoughts, something utterly non-conceptual was here. Yes, there was still anxiety, but this was here. It's the gift that's bestowed by forgiveness. Despite the me's protestations of sacrifice, despite the me thinking it's sacrificing its righteous indignation, that's the gift that's bestowed. So stage 4. Now comes a period of settling down. This is a quiet time in which the teacher of God rests a while in reasonable peace. Now he consolidates his learning. Now he begins to see the transfer value of what he has learned. Resist nothing. The message is this is not about getting everything the me wants. This is about discovering this peace through the absence of wanting, through the forgiveness of this moment exactly as it is, the absence of wanting, a different moment. something invaluable is discovered, bestowed. This non-ego presence in your mind. So now he begins to see the transfer value of what he's learned. Its potential is literally staggering. And the teacher of God is now at the point in his progress at which he sees in it his whole way out. Give up what you do not want, grievances, seeking after the roads of the world. Well, there's nothing wrong with having goals, but seeking happiness in them. You want to give that up. That doesn't work. And keep what does work, which is forgiveness. Understanding happiness can only be here in this moment through forgiveness, not through wanting. Wanting will never be satisfied. The absence of wanting for anything except this moment forgiven. How simple is the obvious? As the Buddha said, all unhappiness comes from wanting, because wanting will never be satisfied. As the Course says, forgiveness brings me everything I want. As it brings this invulnerable peace into my mind. How simple is the obvious, how easy to do. The teacher of God needs this period of respite. He has not yet come as far as he thinks. Yet when he's ready to go on, he goes with mighty companions beside him. Now he rests a while and gathers them before going on. He will not go on from here alone. Now, mighty companions are not really other egos or bodies. The mighty companions are these learnings, these right-minded thoughts. That's what the mighty companions are. So this is the period of settling down. So after the intensity of the first three stages, this is the respite. This is a nice phase. This is a phase where, there's still going to be reaction. There's still going to be, things happen and, you know, um, reactions and grievances but now I know what to do. Now I know what to do. Now I know that what's required is letting go of anything I want in the situation other than the peace forgiveness will bring me. So this is a really nice time. And to get here is a lot. It's a big deal to get this far. You know, many will stay stuck in that first stage because they're insisting it shouldn't have been like this. It shouldn't have happened. It's not right. See, so getting here is a big deal. Actually doing forgiveness instead of arguing about it online, instead of telling everyone else to do it, but actually doing it. That's a big deal. And getting to this place of peace in your life where peace is always attainable through forgiveness, that's a big deal. This is great. And that's what this stage is about. Now, also, this is also where the holy ego, the spiritualized ego is birthed. Okay. Because this is where we start telling everyone, well, I know this and I know that. And this is my guidance. This is my experience. And you should do this and you should do that. And so it's almost, no, it's completely inevitable that there's going to be the birthplace of a spiritualized ego, the one who knows it all. Lots of people here would actually start thinking about themselves as enlightened. You see, um, thinking their mind is healed. You see, because it's nice. Forgiveness can restore my mind to peace. It might take a while, but it'll get there. See? And I know it's the only thing that works. This is a nice place. But again, this is where, yeah, this is where you're going to have spiritualized egos. Fighting with people online. attacking people on their YouTube channel, attacking people in their Facebook posts, going, "You don't understand. I have had this experience, you know. I'm doing this for your own good. You're wrong. See, this is my experience." See, so, in Zen, they call that Zen stink. You start to get a waft of truth. There's still an ego here thinking it owns the truth, right? There's a waft of truth, and then there's Zen stink, which is like feeling like you're better than everyone else, and that all things are not working together for good, that people are wrong on the internet, and they need to be put right by the Holy One, you see? So look, that's all absolutely inevitable, but do keep an eye on that because everyone falls into that trap. But this is a nice phase. There has been serious accomplishment. It's a good place to be. Um, this is our fourth stage. It's a nice phase. And people can stay here a long time. And people can fool themselves they're enlightened and their mind is healed. Start calling themselves enlightened masters. Oh, let me teach you forgiveness. See? Um, so this is our fourth stage. So a nice accomplishment, a respite after all the work, the shadow work. Finally some sense of a light at the end of the tunnel. Finally some sense this is what it's all about. We begin just because we actually did forgiveness instead of fighting with people over it and talking about it, but we actually made it what I'm going to do in my life, no matter what. Massive accomplishment. See? Even if there's a bit of Zen stink. Right? Inevitably. Okay. Now we hit the fifth stage. And this could really be very accurately described as the eye of the needle. So let's hear what the course says about it. The next stage is indeed a period of unsettling. Now must the teacher of God understand that he did not really know what was valuable and what was valueless. All that he really learned so far was that he did not want the valueless and that he did want the valuable. Yet his own sorting out was meaningless in teaching him the difference. The idea of sacrifice, so central to his own thought system, had made it impossible for him to judge. There's still the fear of the me's rights, the me's wants, the me's needs. There's this idea, oh, there's sacrifice. Spirituality's asking a sacrifice of me. You know, I think I could make some of these world's roads work. I think I could find happiness in them, you see. So this idea of sacrifice, so central to his own thought system, had made it impossible for him to judge. He thought he learned willingness, but now he sees that he does not know what the willingness was for. See, he doesn't know yet what the real work is. And now he must attain a state that may remain impossible to reach for a long, long time. He must learn to lay all judgment aside and ask only what he really wants, which is peace, in every circumstance. Were not each step in this direction so heavily reinforced, it will be hard indeed. Now, when you reach this point where you understand no judgment is justified, all things are working together for good, there are no exceptions. When you've reached this point and you're willing to work on it, and you've had this peace come into your mind, it does bring with it intuition. This peace in your mind that has nothing to do with thought does bring with it intuition. And the way in which each step is reinforced is that this intuition will keep taking you deeper and deeper into the egoic identification and how to undo it. So this is what the Course would call the Holy Spirit. Like literally, you'll be shown in each moment everything you need to know to see where all your ego fixations are and how to let them go through forgiveness. But there's something very important to note here. He must learn to lay all judgments aside. Now, I want you to ask yourself a question. If there are no judgments in your mind at all about what's right or wrong, if there is only surrender, all things working together for good, if there is nothing here arguing with anything, which is what it means to lay all judgment aside, is there a me? Is there a me? Without something here going, I like that, I don't like that, that's the good bit, that's the bad bit, people should do that, they shouldn't do that. If all things are working together for good and there's nothing arguing with it, is there a me? There's not. There is an I, there's not a me. There is the I that everything and everyone is. But there's not a me. There's no specialness. Me is an I with objects. The objects of thoughts and feelings and stories and memories and grievances and seeking and resist. See, they're add-ons to the I. That's the I with object. See? So there's nothing to the me so the I of the me is always the I of the I. But the me is a misidentification. What you are is pure I am. That's the I. What you think you are is an I am this. I am a person that this has happened to. I am a person with a past and a future. I'm a person that thinks this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong and people should do this and they shouldn't do that. And that should be happening in the world and that shouldn't happen in the world. And people have no right to do that in the world. See, that's an I am this. An I with objects, misidentified with thought, which is always judgment. See, so if judgment is never justified ever, where's the me? Where's the special one? It's not there. When there's no judgment, there's no ego. Because all judgment is the ego. The me can only judge. That's a good bit, that's a bad bit, that's right, that's wrong, that should happen, that shouldn't happen. The me can only judge. It can only fixate. But the I cannot judge. The I cannot fixate. Course in Miracles says the ego analyzes. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this should have happened, that shouldn't have happened. The ego analyzes. The Holy Spirit accepts. The I accepts. But in the absence of judgment, there's no me. There is an I, objectless. So, and in this stage, we realize that, okay, I thought the valueless thing was grievances, and I've learned that the valuable thing is forgiveness. But I thought there was a me that was doing forgiveness. I thought there was this body in the world that was doing forgiveness. I thought this was so this person could be a happy person. I thought it was so this person could be a holy person. But now I realize that with no judgments whatsoever, there really isn't a person here at all. There's no me. There's no self. There's nothing to the false self except seeking and resisting, grasping and grievances, special love and special hate. If this is so, if judgment is never justified about anything, no matter what's happening in this moment, it should be happening. And any argument with it or desire for something other than this moment is ego, then the real acceptance of all things working together for good means there isn't a me, because there's nothing to the me except this nonsense, this war with all things working together for good, this pushing and pulling, grasping and grievances, special love and special hate. If this is really so, then actually the real valueless thing that I couldn't recognize before is the me. I thought I was the one getting guidance. I thought I was the one doing forgiveness. I thought I was going to be the holy ego. Thought I was going to be the holy person in the world. But actually, no. The real valueless thing is the me. So we've had dark night of the soul, everything falls apart. Stage two, learning what's valuable and not valuable. Stage three, putting that into practice with real forgiveness, not just talking about it and playing lip service to it. Stage four, this is pretty good. This is pretty nice. There's much more peace in my life. Even when it's awful, I can use forgiveness and it comes back to peace. Really nice phase. But there is this dawning realization that the real valueless thing is this identification, this thing I take myself to be. This isn't really about making the me more forgiving, making the me more holy. This is about learning that it has nothing to do with what I really am. And it's going to have to go. Somewhere between four, this period, this settled period of four, and this disruptive period of five, pure grace will deliver the holy instant. And the holy instant is an almost complete cessation of doubt and fear. It's where identity clearly is utterly independent of thoughts, and its very nature is peace. And honestly, it looks out on a world that's peaceful no matter what. It sees itself as the peace that everything is. It's beautiful. That's an awakening. That's your initial awakening right there. There's no opposition to anything. There's just peace. It's like the very nature of what you are is peace. Now, if you didn't feel enlightened before, now you will. You're like, oh my God, I've reached the end, you see? But it's pure grace. And like I say, you might knock 2 months out of it. You might knock 2 weeks out of it. You might knock, if you're lucky, 6 months out of it. Okay, but it's pure grace and it allows you to know what the valuable thing is and what the valueless thing is. He, you've seen behind the curtain to the Wizard of Oz. You understand identity is a total scam. It's made out of thoughts. The me, the I with objects, stories about what it is, a self-concept. See, in this period of grace, this awakening, this holy instant, it's discovered identity's a scam. The me was the problem all along. The very nature of what I am is peace itself, and it knows everything as itself. That's the awakening that takes place here. Now, it doesn't last because you haven't undone all the sin, guilt, and fear in the mind. You haven't undone your ego permanently. This is pure grace because you actually did the forgiveness process instead of messing around with a bit of forgiveness to destroy. You understood the world should be like this, and its only purpose is to show me the darkness in my mind that I will forgive and be with no stories about it that the world is responsible. You actually did that. The peace comes into the back of your mind. At some stage, that peace moves from the background and floods the foreground. And that's the holy instant. Now, this peace is the identity of everything I'm looking at, the same way that it's mine. Okay? That's your awakening right there. Because you did forgiveness properly. Because you stopped fighting with the world and understood it was only for forgiveness. So this is pure grace, but now the cat's out of the bag. So the ego will come back. You'll start getting involved in thoughts again. You'll start getting involved in thinking you have an identity and that you're a self-concept and you're a me. You see, you'll start that's all going to come back. But now you've seen behind the curtains. You can never ever fool yourself again that the me is real. You can never ever fool yourself again that anything about the me can compare to the peace that was here when the me wasn't. By pure grace, you now know that. There is nothing for me if I continue meing. I want what was here when there was no me. A pure I with no stories, no past or future, objectless. What I was when I experienced what the Course means when it says, forget every thought you've ever had, forget this world, forget this Course, and come with wholly empty hands unto your God. In this grace period, I knew what it was to come with wholly empty hands, no objects, no thoughts about what I am. I know what it is to come with holy empty hands unto my God. And I can't unsee it. Here I am back meing, right? Here I am back involved in the ego thought system, thinking I'm thinking. You see, I can't fool myself anymore. This needs to be undone. This, I wasn't ready to see this before. Now I am ready to know the valueless thing, and it's the me. It's the story of what I am. It's the self-concept. It's the I with objects, identification with objects. What I want is I knowing I without object. Because now I know that is what this whole thing has been leading up to. So this is the fifth stage of trust. It means all judgment must be laid aside. So this fifth stage requires letting go of attachments even to spiritual experience or any experience. But this isn't about a state. States come and go. On this spiritual journey, if you genuinely do this forgiveness, you will get to know like love in your mind. And you'll think that's everything. But it's kind of not. It sounds wrong to say that. That kind of non-dual bliss state, which everyone gets, and which is just beautiful, that's a spiritual experience. That's a state. But what you are, I with no objects, I with needing no thoughts to know what it is as I, that's not a state. It's not an experience. It's stepping outside the world of experiences, the world of thoughts. It's not needing any experience except the one that's here. Maybe it's non-dual bliss, maybe it's grief. But what you truly are wants no experience except this one, this present moment. So all this attachment to being the one with the spiritual experiences, the one that's talking to the Holy Spirit, the one that's doing all that has to go. It's been realized that's all nonsense. Yeah, it served a purpose, but now it has to go. You know, the holy ego has to be surrendered as much as the bad ego was. That's why this is the eye of the needle. The one who wants to go through this stage cannot pass through the needle. The me, the I with objects, the I with a past and a future, the I with the aversions and the grievances and the graspings and the cravings, that I with opinions, the I with objects, mixed up with thoughts. The me cannot pass through the eye of the needle. So this me reaches the eye of the needle, and the only thing that can pass through is I. I knowing I without objects. No thing. No self-concept. No me. Only I, only the I that is everything and everyone can pass through. That's the realization in the fifth stage. So as the Course says, you can remain here for a long time, looking at the ways you still identify as a me, all the objects that you have to see and forgive to dissolve those identifications. There's a whole new level of work to be done here now. And this can take a long time. I'm sure as hell not finished it. Okay, but at the end of this, I knowing I without objects, no self-concept, no me, only the I am, which is the truth of everyone. That's what the sixth of the stages is about. To get there, It has to be completely understood that there has to be a letting go of any attachment whatsoever to any experience. It has to be completely understood that there's no way anything should ever be other than as how it is appearing now. That's the absence of judgment. It doesn't matter what's happening. There is no way, there's no right or wrong in this situation. There's no way it should be or it shouldn't be. The only way it should be is the way it's appearing, which is for the purpose of forgiveness. End of judgment. Nothing here sitting in judgment on anything anymore. That would be a me. That's gone. There's only I. Nothing is ever wrong. Nothing ever shouldn't be happening. And no judgment is ever valid about anything or anyone ever. The world is always perfect exactly as it is. There is no need for anything here to have an opinion on it. And there is nothing for anything here to do to sort of be the hero of the hour. Everything is as it should be. There are no exceptions. That's what's necessary to reach stage 6. And that's going to take a lot of forgiveness work, a lot of looking at all these places you still think you're a me, and learning to come with wholly empty hands unto your God and live there. Without a me. So stage 6, which is the real world. And finally, there is a period of achievement. It is here that learning is consolidated. Now what was seen as merely shadows before become solid gains to be counted on in all emergencies, as well as tranquil times. Indeed, the tranquility is their result, the outcome of honest learning, consistency of thought and full transfer. This is the stage of real peace. For here is heaven's state fully reflected. From here, the way to heaven is open and easy. In fact, it is here. Who would go anywhere if peace of mind is already complete? And who would seek to change tranquility for something more desirable? What could be more desirable than this? Completely forgiven world and a mind within which there's only ever peace. See? So it makes an interesting statement there about the real world where there's no more me. There's just the I that everything is. The Course says the forms the broken pieces seem to take, all the me's, mean nothing. For the whole, one I is in each one. And every aspect of the Son of God is just the same as every other part. No more specialness. There's nothing special about the I. It is quite simply what everything and everyone is. And there's nothing different about the I that I am than what everyone is. That's the real world. It's the end of the tiny mad idea. It's the end of duality. That's the real world. The lawns of heaven, as A Course in Miracles calls it. Okay. But it says, in fact, heaven is here. Because ultimately, the Course says the separation is just a faulty formulation of reality with no effect at all. Which means consciousness, which is the me, I with objects, I am, is just a faulty formulation of God. And then the world is just a faulty formulation of consciousness. So the world and consciousness have never actually existed independently. They were only ever appearances of God. Consciousness borrowed its temporary, only apparent reality from God, And the world borrows its only temporary, apparent reality from consciousness. There has never been anything to the me or the world other than God. That's why, even in the real world, which is still an illusion, heaven is already here. Heaven is appearing as everything and was never anything other than heaven. In Buddhism, they would say that same thing. They would say it that nirvana is samsara and samsara is nirvana because samsara never had any reality of its own. It only ever borrowed its reality from nirvana. So in A Course in Miracles, it says, heaven and earth shall pass away, means that they will cease to exist separate from each other. Heaven is earth and earth is heaven. The world is an illusion. Only God is real. God is the world. So that's our real world. That's why in this lesson it's saying, okay, this is the lawns of heaven, but actually it is heaven. Might as well be heaven. Heaven would just be the absence of perception. But even here, where there's still perception, this is heaven. The world was heaven all along. The me was heaven all along. Everything was never anything other than love. It was only ever love. Everything was a faulty formulation of love. And now everything is revealed as love, and love is everything. That's the real world. Okay. We were quite thorough there. Glad everyone's still awake. Um, let's have some hands. Amanda in Brazil. Um, Linda's going to send you an invite to take yourself off mute.
Hi.
Amanda?
Sorry, in the beginning of the call, I was having internet issues, so um, I'm I'm really going through this dark night of the soul for a few years, and it has becoming more intense, like the emotions. Now I'm having like panic attacks, and I'm having like a hard time to, let's say, function in this world, because we still have things to do here. Like I have my parents to take care, I job, relationship. And sometimes it gets so intense that I can't do anything. So I guess it's not helpful if this gets so intense that you start to think about suicide, like you mentioned. And um, I guess I'm asking for a device like to function in the world sometimes when you need to do stuff, because I'm gonna just give a practical example. Um, I'm going with my parents to Europe this next week, and I regret now of agreeing to go with them, because when they invited me, I was feeling guilty about, because my dad almost died, and I couldn't deal really well with the situation. So I had to step away, like I was distant. And then I came back to help them. So my mom asked this, like saying, oh, maybe this is the last trip your dad is going to be able to make. But I'm having so much panic coming up because they are very debilitated, and I'm gonna be on my own with them, and my mind is just going crazy with all the wrong things that can happen there. And, I will have to deal with it in a different country. And, I already have these intense emotions coming up. And for me, it doesn't, I know it's a big illusion they have, they still believe in these things. And I already know, it's not gonna bring happiness. It's just an illusion. I don't have those things anymore. Like people here in Brazil think that going to Europe, it's a big deal. If I tell people about it, and if I say that I'm not excited about it, they
Okay,
will say,
okay, okay,
"Oh,
okay,
how
okay.
come?"
So that's just all your thoughts.
Yeah,
That's all stories.
yes.
So you said your internet connection was unstable in the beginning, so you missed a lot. So we've covered all of this. So it's going to be helpful for you to listen back when the recording goes up. Um,
Oh, I
if you
did
want,
hear.
oh,
I
okay.
did hear
All
everything.
right. Okay.
It was
So the
just in the
first,
very beginning.
okay. So the first stage is surrender. You surrender to this moment, understanding it's exactly as it should be. All your pain and your fear is because you're going, it shouldn't be like this. Oh, I did this under protest and now I'm stuck with it and now I have to go and do this thing and everything could go wrong. And this is all terrible and this is not the way it's meant to be and this is not how I should be and I don't know if I'm capable of all this. And you see, so right now, if you're serious about your spiritual path, if you're serious about the other way, your first step is surrender, acceptance. Everything is exactly the way it should be, except in your ego's opinion. The beginning of peace, the way out of darkness is surrender. It's giving up this idea. I should have opinions about this. I should have grievances with this. I should push and pull on this. There's a good way this should be, and there's a bad way this should be, and I'm the arbiter of that. I know what everything is for. I know what should be happening and what shouldn't be happening, and this is bad and it's wrong, and I should push against it, but I can't, and I'm stuck with it. That's what the ego does. That madness, that big circular thinking. Oh, I said I do it, but I don't really want to do it. But I have to do it or I'm going to feel guilty. But now I'm doing it, but it's going to be awful for me and it's not going to be right. But I can't get out of it because of the guilt and it's too late. But I don't know if I can cope with it. Okay, so that's just the ego's mess. That's what the ego does. So you want to start with step one. If everything is exactly the way it should be, you don't get to have an opinion on it. That's surrender, acceptance. I accept this world is a classroom. I am refusing the ego's bullshit that it has fed me all these decades, that the world is so I can be happy if it's a certain way. I reject that now. That never worked. It's not working now. I'm still miserable. I'm in a dark night of the soul. I have all this fear and anxiety and okay, and I reject the ego has got me exactly nowhere. Fighting with the world, having an opinion on it, that it shouldn't be like this and it needs to be different. Oh, but I can't go through with that because I feel guilty, but now I have to do it and I don't want it. That's just the ego's bullshit. And that is the cause of your pain, not what's happening in the world, but the ego's bullshit. In surrender, you don't get to be an innocent victim anymore. You don't get to decide how the world should be anymore. You accept all things are working together for good, unless I want to be an ego. But that is the cause of my pain. You are responsible for your own mind, not Europe or Brazil or your parents or what you said in the past and what you should have said and you shouldn't have said. You, right now, are responsible for your own peace. And that comes from no longer arguing with what is. That's how you get out of this first step, out of this first stage of the dark night of the soul. Arguing isn't valid. Acceptance is. This should all be happening. Does that mean there's not still fear? No, there is. Does that mean there's not still inadequacy? No, there is. But by God, all of this should be happening. That's the beginning of peace. That's the beginning of peace. That's the beginning of the other way. Now you're on a journey. Until this is understood, the journey hasn't started yet. You're still in hell. Okay? The minute it's understood, by God, I don't know anything else at this stage, but I know everything should be exactly as it is. I know that much. That's the beginning of peace. And that kind of peace that comes when you stop getting involved with the ego's bullshit. It's circular stories that are utter binds, that there's no happiness in them. Well, I want this, but I don't want that. And I really want to do this, but I'd feel guilty about it. And then I can't do it, but I want to do it. And there's no happiness in that. None. So I'm going to reject that. Whatever's happening is how it should be. So I'm not getting involved in that mess. I'm going to accept how things are. And when I do, in the beginning, that seems like sacrifice. Oh, but I'm a me. This is a lot to be asked of the me. Oh, look what I'm sacrificing. See? In the beginning, that's there. All right? But when I accept, no, I will surrender to this moment exactly as it is, because it should be like this. Now the peace comes. There's just this little glimmer. It's just this light that just flickers. The minute the grasping and the grievances and the fighting stop, the minute I realize if this is all things working together for good, what would I fight against? So I surrender. The minute I do that, by Jesus, the minute I learn that lesson, something starts to flicker in my mind. It is not the me. It is something non-conceptual. It is just a piece in the background. It's this strength that was missing. I can't say anything about it except there's just where there was static of doom in the background, there's this glimmer of peace. Because I've decided I'm not listening to the ego's bullshit anymore. I'm not going to fight with it. Let thoughts say whatever they want. I'm not going to fight with them. Let emotions do whatever they want. I'm not going to fight with them because the world is as it should be, and I'm not fighting with that. Yes, the thoughts are fighting with it. That's not you. That's a wild illusion, frantic and distraught with no reality whatsoever. That has nothing to do with your reality. That insane voice talking to itself in circles with no hope of happiness in all the ridiculous circles. I should do this and I shouldn't do that, and this is the right and it's wrong. And if I was just happy, blah. That's not you. That's not you. That's an activity of thoughts that you're mixing yourself up with. That peace that comes when you stop fighting with everything and listening to that bullshit and just accept, that's the glimmer of realization of the truth of what you are. And it comes when we refuse to fight, not with the world, not with thoughts, not with emotions. When I just become, as the Course says, the other way is to remain quiet in the midst of the turmoil the ego is making. I begin to discover the truth of what I am. And from here, there is a strength, there is a grace. It will get me through whatever situations are all things working together for good. So, Amanda, that's your first step. Surrender, acceptance. This is what happened. This is what was decided. This is what's happening. This is what I'm doing. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it will be all things working together for good. End of fight. Just that glimmering of peace is here. That's the start. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Um, just if I notice that the panic attack is coming and I don't know, I'm in the middle of the airport with them, is there anything to uh not
Stop
make it
fighting.
worse?
Stop fighting. Refuse to fight with anything. Refuse to fight with anything. Yes, there's a worlding. It doesn't mean anything. If it doesn't mean anything, why would you fight with it? You would only fight with it if you thought you meant something. If it doesn't mean anything, there's no reason to fight with it. It's just what's apparently happening. The world is worlding. It doesn't mean anything, so I don't have to fight with it. Another element of the dream is that thoughts are thoughting. They don't mean anything. So I don't have to fight with them. If I fight with them, I have to say they mean something, but they don't. And emotions are emoting. All of that is part of the isness of this moment. Maybe it's a panic attack. It doesn't mean anything. If it doesn't mean anything, why would I fight with it? I have to give meaning to the meaningless first. And now I'm busy pushing and pulling and fighting and shifting and changing. And oh, it's not the way it should be. And I should be changing it. And this is wrong. This is terrible. Peace is found when you fight with nothing. Let the world do what it's doing. Let thoughts do what they're doing. Let emotions do what they're doing. Let a panic attack do what it's doing. Your only job is to forgive it. Your only job is how much better today can I be at forgiving all of that instead of fighting with it? And what you are will tell you of itself. That's your only job. It's so simple. The ego loves to complicate this. Lesson number one, nothing I see means anything. Lesson number two, I've made up all the meanings everything has. This is right and this is wrong, this is good and this is bad. Lesson number three, I don't understand anything I see because it has made up meanings. The only purpose it has is forgiveness. Lesson number four, these thoughts don't mean anything. Lesson five, I'm never upset for the reason I think. I'm upset because I'm looking at the world and the thoughts and the made up meanings and I'm saying they mean something. They don't mean anything. Everything is for forgiveness. Everything is for learning to fight nothing. And in that refusal to fight with anything, I touch into the truth of the Holy Spirit, which is what you really are, except you think you're a me. But when there's no fight, when the purpose of the world is shifted, when it's seen it has no purpose but forgiveness, for this, to learn to fight with nothing, because nothing means anything. This is a dream. It's going to happen. It just doesn't mean anything. Something unspeakable is here in the midst of the darkness. And the darkness will fall before it, and you will know that you have always been this. Everything else was a nightmare made of thoughts. But this is so important to understand. This transition from the first stage of the dark night of the soul into the second is, by Jesus, everything should be as it is. That's it. That's your springboard into eternity. The end of judgment. Everything follows from that. From that one decision to say, I will switch the purpose of this world once and for all. The minute that's decided, the light in your mind will bring you through everything you need to do to become completely liberated. I must shift the purpose of the world. That's the only way. The only way out is through. That's my first step. I'll fight with nothing. This gives me the strength. And whatever happens is happening. Whatever decisions come. Whatever actions come. And whatever it is, it will be as it should be. That's the end of anxiety. Doesn't mean you won't fall back into indulging the madness and having anxiety, but that's what forgiveness is for. That's what your miracle is. You look at the activity of the mind and you go, but that doesn't mean anything. See, and in that is freedom. In that is freedom. See? So what? Yes, the mind is insane. So what? It's riddled with anxiety and self-doubt. So what? How well can I forgive it? How well can I stop fighting? How much better tomorrow can I be than I am today at not fighting with the lunatic that pretends to be me? That's our first step. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
And
Thank you
from
very
there,
much.
decisions come from a peaceful mind instead of one that's fighting with everything. And that's the beginnings of understanding guidance. Thanks a million for your question, Amanda. So Joyce, you have a question. We'll take yours and then we'll finish up. My lovely assistant Linda will give you an invitation to take yourself off mute.
Did you get it, Joyce?
No, she's still on. Did you get an invite there, Joyce? Joyce's iPad? Did you get an invite to take yourself off mute? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is Joyce's husband, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
I sit in to these classes with her. I've got a question, Keith. We here that are attending the class I would consider myself to be fortunate to be able to learn what you have told us, to be able to get through all of these different phases. Okay. Not that I'm anywhere close to them. I have the same issues as the previous person had, also with anxiety and things like that. But at least now I know that it's not from out there that it's happening, although my entire life, that's exactly where I thought it was coming from. And I still deal with that on a daily basis also. What about all those other separate people out there that do not have the benefit of a path or a Course in Miracles or anything like that, and are also suffering, and some not suffering, or at least some not aware that they're suffering? Okay, where do they get that knowledge that's necessary to understand the me part of this thing, to be able to get to where we're all trying to get? How does that work? Because from what I remember, for us to return to one with God, it's got to be the entire sonship. Okay, how do we get those others as well as ourselves to come along with us?
It's only when I knows itself as an object, seems to know itself as an object, is deluded that it's an object. Only when the I gets mixed with objects, thoughts, feelings, stories, memories, and drives a sense of identity from it to become a me, a Richard, only from the perspective, the false perspective, the mistaken identification of I as Richard, only from this perspective is there others. In truth, everything is already I knowing I, with no objects. I am. That's the real world. It's already here. It's done. It's unconditional love already, everywhere, oneself. That's what's here. Within that dream, because the real world is still a dream, it reflects heaven because of its oneness. But within that dream, there's the belief in I, Richard. From that perspective, there are other, from the perspective of a me, there are other me's out there. But there's not. So A Course in Miracles says the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. See, at the moment, you're not accepting the atonement, which is that everything is the I. Everything is pure I am. From the perspective of not coming with wholly empty hands onto your God without any objects, without your stories, without your self-concept. Prior to the releasing of all that, meing, it seems like there's a world of good people and bad people and advanced people and unadvanced people and enlightened people and unenlightened people. They're all shadow figures in your mind because, and they are from the perspective of a shadow person called Richard and me. In truth, this is already the real world. So the unhealed healer in A Course in Miracles keeps the me and sees a whole load of other me's and tries to be the holy me that fixes the other terribly broken me's. That's the unhealed healer. The healed healer understands everyone is already the Son of God. Everyone is already I. The actual I of the I am this misidentification, the I of the me is the same I. The me is just the I with objects, which veil the identity of I from itself. And the I of the I is the I of God. There really is only one I. The only difference is the belief the I can be changed by objects. It can't. So the healed healer in A Course in Miracles undoes all the identification with objects, all the identification with the objects of thoughts and feelings and stories and memories, they're objects. They're fine. They don't mean anything. But the identification is let go to come with wholly empty hands unto God and know myself as I without objects. Pure I am, with an inviolable period at the end. I am, full stop. That's coming with wholly empty hands unto my God. That's knowing the truth of I. And from here, the healed healer knows this is the truth of everyone. If I'm not an I am this abomination, if I am not a me, if I am the I that knows itself without thought, this is the truth of absolutely everyone out there already. That's the healed healer. Everything that comes from this will be loving and kind and guided and led. So the problem with, look at all those broken egos out there, is that you're attacking the Son of God to see him as broken, but only because you attacked yourself first. That's what the Course in Miracles says. So the healed healer would never, ever see brothers as broken and set about fixing them. The healed healer knows they can't be broken. I might be deluded, it's a me, but it never stops being I. That's how we save the world. By refusing to see it as broken. Now, from that, guidance will come through at the level of the dream in terms of what is required in each moment for all things working together for good. But at no point in time does a healed healer make suffering real and set out to fix it. The healed healer sees only the truth of everyone, which is I, shining pristine with not a single object to soil it. And by knowing your brother is that, that's what it means to rest in God. And that is the rest that pulls your brother to his. So what I would say, Richard, is don't you even consider what you have to do to fix broken people out there. What you got to do is accept the atonement for yourself. What you got to do is follow these stages. The Course says miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. The I has to be known without the objects, because that's the purification, and that is what allows love to meet the needs of every moment through you, and you've no investment in it because you know everything's already fine. That would be the real practice of A Course in Miracles. But we got to work on ourselves first. We've got to accept the atonement for ourselves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks for the question, Richard. Guys, thanks a million for your attention. It was another long one. Loads of you stayed with us, which is great. Before we finish, I want to invite you because next Saturday, on the 15th of March, in Lancaster Hall Hotel in London, myself and the Miracle Network, we will be putting on a workshop called Forgiveness as the Means of Awakening. And you can come along and join us live. There's still some places left I think we have about 60 places filled up so far. We still have a few places left for in-person participation in the workshop if you want. And we have unlimited availability for online participation in the workshop. I'll be there, Sharon will be there, Dan and Teresa will be there in London. And so if you want to join us live in person for that workshop, Forgiveness as the Means of Awakening, you can come along and join us live. The booking is through miracles.org.uk, which is the website for the Miracle Network. And like I say, you're quite welcome to join us for online either. And if it's a little too early for you to join us, for example, from the Pacific time zone, you do get a recording afterwards, which you get access to if you don't want to get out of your bed at 5 a.m. just wanted to remind you of that if you wish to participate in that workshop, Forgiveness is the Means of Awakening. And in this workshop, we're going to use a very direct means of going straight to the truth of what you are in the holy instant. So if you're interested, check it out, miracles.org.uk in the events section, and it's the Forgiveness is the Means of Awakening. Guys, thanks a million for your attention. I hope you got something useful out of today. We shall catch up in the Facebook group during the week. We will not do it all again next week because we will all be in Lancaster Hall Hotel next weekend doing the workshop. But the following weekend, we'll be back in business with the podcast. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.